This video is designed to teach you about flashbacks. If you've never experienced a flashback before, then it's very difficult to understand exactly what it is like to live through one. And oftentimes, it's difficult for somebody who does live through them to even explain them. And so this video is both for those who are living through them and need answers on how to cope or how to process, but it's also for those who have never experienced a flashback and they want to understand more of what it's like. So I hope to explain to you what a flashback is, why we have them, when we typically have them, and how to overcome and cope and deal with flashbacks. So the best way for me to describe what a flashback is it's like a cassette tape that is where we are rewinding in our mind and going back to a place that we have not thought about in a while, that our brain has tucked away to present back to us at a time when we're ready, whether it is a time when we have disassociated, which is something that I did often when I was going through pain as a kid. But we rewind and we go back to typically a traumatic event that impacted us in a great way and has continued to impact us. This is one thing that people don't realize. Just because you haven't seen it in a memory or in a flashback doesn't mean that what happened to you isn't impacting you on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the reasons why flashbacks are actually a good thing. They are pulling out areas of our body that we need to work on, that we need help to process through so that we can become a better version of ourselves. And so when we are presented with a flashback and it takes us back to a moment where we are reliving an event, it is as if we are in that event in every way, shape, or form. And oftentimes it's not a memory that you have seen before. Typically it's completely brand new, but yet it makes sense because you can see why you are the way you are once you remember this flashback. It's been a part of who you are all along. It had basically just gone away and hid in your brain until it felt safe enough to come out and explain to you what happened and how you felt during it. When you have a memory, you typically just see the memory in your mind. You might feel the emotions attached to the memory, if it was a happy emotion or a sad or an angry type memory. But with a flashback, it's completely different because it literally takes you back in all five senses. So you see it as if you are there. You feel it as if it's happening to you in that very moment. You can smell the smells, you can taste the taste, and you can hear the sounds as if you are there. For me, whenever I have a flashback, typically I experience all five of these senses as if I am back there in the event. But oftentimes I am almost dual sensing things. So for example, if somebody is next to me in present day and saying to me, Rachel, you're safe. Rachel, you're here. You're okay. I'm right here. I can hear them as well as hear the people in my memory. Same with somebody holding my hand. I can feel somebody holding my hand in the present day just as much as I can feel the attack that's being done to me in the flashback. And so it's powerful when you are going through a flashback to have somebody near you who can remind you that you are safe, that this is just a flashback, that somebody is here with you, that you're not alone, and to just almost keep you in both places. That way you are able to process through your flashback like your body is saying you need to, but you aren't going to get yourself stuck there. You have a pull back to the present day that will get you back out of that flashback to where you can continue on with your life. Now, we're not always able to do that. We don't always have somebody with us whenever we are experiencing a flashback. But if we've had it in the past, then we can remind ourselves of it, that people do care. People are here in the present day. remind ourselves of the times when they held our hand whenever we were walking through a flashback. Also doing things in the present day that remind you of where you really are. So for me, sticking my hand in ice water, that helps keep me present. I can still process the flashback, but not go fully and deeply into it. Oftentimes being around my kids will pull me out to where I know that I need to be present day as a mom, as an adult, not 9 years old living in the flashback. And so hearing my kids talk will pull me out some. But that is a good way. They call it a grounding technique, where you can keep yourself grounded in the present while you are walking through your flashback.
So, when you've had a traumatic event, what is normal? Well, flashbacks are actually a very normal part of your healing journey. When I mentioned before that our brain will hide away memories, it's not because it's trying to trick you and mess with your mind. It's because it's protecting you in the moment. If we went through traumatic event after traumatic event and we lived in the moment with every physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, if we lived all of it as it was happening, we would not have survived.
I personally disassociated when I was a child and used that as a coping skill, a protective tool to take me somewhere else and keep me safe in my brain and in my heart while bad things were happening. Disassociation is disconnecting from the present moment for a time. And basically, you are going somewhere else in your brain. It's not like you go to a field of flowers, or at least not for me. Everything just I lose time. I guess it just goes black. I don't know. I lose that time period in my memory. There's nothing there anymore. And so I disconnect from that present moment for a time. And this is a common thing for kids to do, especially because their young brains and hearts and souls cannot handle the terrible abuse that they're going through. And so oftentimes they dissociate and they don't realize it. I didn't realize it at the time. I knew that my relationship with my coach was wrong and bad, but I could not remember the terrible things that I had gone through in that time period. And so it was good in many aspects because it protected my mind. I have been told by many counselors that I should be sitting in a corner somewhere, sucking my thumb, unable to function. And I'm not. And a big part of that is because God blessed me with a brain that was able to disassociate and escape me from that terrible time in my life when I needed it. And so one of the downfalls, though, with dissociation is I was not able to then present to people what was happening in that moment because I didn't know myself. It was hidden somewhere in my brain. And so I think because I did disassociate so often as a child, I have a lot of memories in my brain that are tucked away, hidden away, in protection of me until I am ready to deal with it and handle it. And oftentimes I have those moments now where I am ready to handle it. And so then a flashback will come and it will pull one of those memories out from that hidden place in my mind and say, here we are, we're ready to work through this. And I do believe that God presents them to us when we're ready, and He knows when we're ready. I know a lot of people who have had an amazing response to something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, something. But and EMDR has been great for a lot of people. So I'm definitely not knocking it, but I know that it brings up things within us and causes flashbacks and causes us to relive memories. And sometimes we're not ready for it yet. God knows when we are ready and if we will be ready to deal with some of those flashbacks that have been kept dormant in our mind. And so disassociation is a beautiful tool. I think oftentimes it goes hand in hand with flashbacks, not always. I think you can have flashbacks without disassociation, but I do think oftentimes they go hand in hand.
On the outside, you probably won't be able to tell that I am in a flashback. But what's going on in my brain is extremely traumatic. And I'm not always able to even explain it to people. There's been many times where I have been, let's say, at my kid's basketball game, and I'm wanting so badly to be in the present moment, but what's going on in my brain is traumatizing. And it's me as a little girl. And typically, I'm not the only one. There's somebody else in my memory who is hurting me and coming after me. And I'm reliving those moments while I'm sitting at my kid's basketball game. And I'm trying to have conversation with people. I'm trying to enjoy watching my kids play basketball at the same time as I'm being brutally hurt in all five senses. And so flashbacks are incredibly difficult to live with. Oftentimes, I have struggled to even want to leave my house because I didn't know when a flashback was going to come. They can come at any point. But isolating, even though that feels safest, is not the way that we want to live our life. One thing that I've learned too is that there's something called emotional flashbacks. And emotional flashbacks are difficult because you don't have the visual to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, but it's still very real.
The cycle of a flashback is probably different for everybody, but I can only explain what it's like for me in hopes that maybe it will click for you. But the cycle of a flashback for me always starts emotional. And so whenever I'm experiencing extreme sadness, maybe I feel anger, maybe I feel confusion. It could be so many different things, and I don't know where it's coming from. Those emotions typically come first for me when a flashback is on its way. Another sign for me is knowing when what I like to call go 9. And so my abuse started when I was 9 years old, and there's many times that emotionally I will go back to being a 9-year-old little girl. And if I recognize that I'm acting 9 years old, it's typically one of two things. Number one, it could be that I've been triggered in my environment, so I would need to check my environment. But number two, it could be that a flashback is coming. And so emotionally, I've gone back to that scared, hurting, broken 9-year-old little girl. And that's often my first clue that a flashback is on its way. The second one for me typically comes physically. And so I will feel the physical symptoms of a flashback after I feel the emotional symptoms. And typically it'll come like through physical pain. It'll be something that I can feel the hands on me. I can feel the hurt. I can feel all of the sensations that my body felt in the moment. I am now feeling them physically as if I'm still there. And it's difficult because obviously I'm not there. Obviously the hands are not on me, but yet they very much feel like they are. And so that's typically the second clue that I'm in the flashback. And so if I've not figured it out by the emotional side of things, I typically figure out, okay, this is a flashback once I start to physically feel the symptoms of it. And then the last thing that I typically experience whenever a flashback is coming is visual. I will see it, and I don't always see it immediately from start to finish. In fact, oftentimes it will come to me in pieces. And so it'll be almost like a movie reel. And I will have maybe even just a snippet of the middle of the flashback. And then I will see a little bit more the next time it plays. And it continues to go back to the beginning of where it started and work its way through until I have from start to finish the memory, the flashback, completely lived through. And once I've gotten to that point, then I am able to move that flashback from one part of my brain to another part where it now is no longer something I physically feel. I'm no longer living in it, but I am now just experiencing it as a bad memory. So I might still have emotions tied to it, but it's just a bad memory now instead of something I'm living through. And so that is how the cycle of a flashback typically plays out for me. Now, it can last hours, it can last days. It just depends on how intense the flashback is and how much time I have willing to commit to walking myself through it. There have, years in the past I have experienced where I didn't have a choice. When it came, and how it came, and I just had to deal with it. But as I have gotten stronger, and this has taken years, but as I've gotten stronger, I have been able to recognize that a flashback's coming, set it aside, tell myself, even tell that inner child inside of me, tell her, I am going to process this soon. Right now, I am at the grocery store and I can't process it, but I'm going to process it soon. So I will set it aside for a time and then go back to it whenever I am in a safe space, whenever I am alone, where I can truly allow myself to walk through it, experience it, get what I need to out of it, and then move on.
So here are the 9 ways that at STOPSIS we consider how you heal through a flashback. And I've seen things that say how to stop a flashback. And in my personal opinion, you don't want to stop the flashback. And I know that sounds insensitive and maybe odd. And truthfully, when a flashback begins to come, my first instinct is to try to stop it because I don't want to relive another hell of a moment. But when you are having a flashback, it's saying that your brain is ready to heal a little bit more. It's God's way of saying, this is something that I tucked away to protect you in the moment, but it still affects you. It still impacts your everyday life, whether you have seen it or not. As far as the memory part of it goes, it still affects you. And so now God is saying, here, we need to work through this. We need to process what happened to you and how it still impacts you so you can take back more control of your life. So I have learned that when I try to stop my flashbacks, all it does is push it down for a time, and then the flashback's going to force its way through whether I'm ready or not. And usually I have a bad attitude about it. I'm angry. I am ticked off that I'm having to relive this moment again. And it's just not helpful. But whenever I realize that a flashback's coming and I let it come and I put myself in a place where I'm safe, where I know I will remain safe, and I allow the flashback to come to me as it's ready, then I'm able to move past it quicker and gain more from it. So these are my 9 ways to heal through a flashback. Number 1, name it. Call it for what it is. This is a flashback. This does not define me. This is not my fault. This is not God punishing me. This is simply a flashback of something that I lived through. And even when I change the way that I discuss it or say it, like, for example, if I say, oh, I lived through that, versus I lived through that. there's power in our words. There's power in how we perceive these flashbacks. And so be proud of yourself. I mean, yes, this sucks and it's not fun and I don't wish it on anybody, but the truth is this happened to us. This is our reality. And to act like it didn't only makes things worse. So name it for what it is. This is a flashback. Number 2, speak life to yourself. Remind yourself, I am safe. This isn't happening anymore. I didn't do anything wrong. These are ways to almost be that adult to the child who was hurting now. So you can tell yourself, I'm not in that moment anymore. I am safe right now. This is when you do your grounding tools. So I talked before about how all 5 senses are affected in a flashback. You can see it, you can taste it, you can smell it, you can hear it, you can feel it. All of it is affected. And so in the same way, if you speak life to yourself and pull yourself back out with those same 5 senses, count 5 things in the room that are brown. Or put your hand in a bowl of ice water. That one helps me a lot. Or put yourself around your kids and remind yourself that you are in the present. This is not happening anymore. Speaking that life to yourself, it still allows the flashback to come, but you don't have to be completely engulfed by it. Number 3, this too shall pass. I often will have to remind myself that I have survived 100% of my flashbacks up until this point, and I will survive this one too. Because when I'm in them, it doesn't always feel like I am going to survive. I mean, you're living in that hell for a little while, and it takes your breath away. It hurts just the same as it hurts when it's actually happening to you. And so you have to remind yourself, I'm going to live through this. I'm going to get to the other side. This is not going to last forever. And it's just another one of those positive truths to remind yourself. Number 4, identify the feelings underneath. This is huge. Put words to what you are feeling. When you can put a word to something that's going on the inside of you, it gives it a chance to be released. And so you're not keeping it captive in your mind anymore. You are not holding those feelings as a prisoner anymore. You are getting them out, which allows you freedom and control and power and just easier life. You don't want to keep those things in. And when you put words to what was done to you, and when you're able to identify how you feel based on what was done to you, you are taking back control. You are no longer letting it empower you. You are empowering it. So as much as you can, say the words, write the words down. Sometimes writing is actually better than even saying it, because there's often times with a flashback, I can't form words with my mouth, but I can write it. And then there are even times when there are no English words to define what was done to me. And I cannot find a word to write down, but I can draw it. And just getting it out in that way brings me more freedom. Number 5, console your inner child. So this is not a multiple personality situation. Everybody has an inner child. And that inner child is impacted still to this day and still needs a healthy adult to be there for her, to take care of her, to love her, to protect her. And so when you're having a flashback, you need to remind your inner child, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to be the adult that you needed when you were being hurt. I am going to love you. I am going to believe you. I'm going to listen to you. Everything will be okay. I have your back. Console your inner child. Remind them that they are loved, and nothing will ever change that, and you aren't going anywhere. Things that you needed to hear when you were a kid, I believe you. You're safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Whatever you needed to hear as a kid, console your inner child in that way, because she's still in there and she still needs to hear that. Number 6, ask God for help. I will oftentimes put on worship music. I will open my Bible. I will cry out to God because I don't want to go through a flashback alone. And I know He is ready and willing to walk me through that flashback so that I don't have to do it alone. And the moments when I have done it alone, it's because I ran away from Him, not the other way around. But cry out to Him. Use Him. Depend on Him. He's already lived through it once with you whenever it was actually happening. So let Him hold your hand and hold you as you walk through another flashback. He will cry with you. He will mourn with you. He never wanted this to be a situation that you're in. But since you are, and since we live in a fallen, evil world, and these are the things that we deal with, let Him be there to walk you through it and to take care of you like He wants to. Number 7, focus on your current body and your current feelings. So whenever I have walked through a flashback and I have seen it, smelt it, heard it, tasted it, all of it, whenever I have gotten through it from start to finish, and it is then ready to be moved to a different spot in my brain, it's no longer hiding, it's no longer now a flashback, but it is now being moved to a memory, just a really bad memory. Now it's time to pull yourself out of it. It's time to remind yourself where you are, who you are, and what you want to accomplish. So I feel like it's important to not only have a present perspective of where I'm at now and what I need to be doing now, but also to have a future perspective. One of the things I've recently started doing is dreaming. And dreaming is really hard for a survivor because it just doesn't feel safe. To dream is to think of tomorrow. And right now, you don't know if you're going to survive, so to think of tomorrow just seems impossible. But as I've started to heal and I've been able to dream, I can tell you things now that I want to accomplish within the next 5 years. Goals that I have, where I see myself, how I see my family. And with those goals in mind, I know there's things that I need to get done today. And so having those goals, having those steps that I know I need to accomplish today helps pull me out of that flashback of the past and put my feet back on solid ground and start moving forward again. And it's really easy to get stuck in depression, to get stuck in anxiety, and to get stuck in that moment of the flashback. And it takes a lot of strength and willpower. And most of the time when I come out of a flashback, I am exhausted. Physically, mentally, spiritually, all of it. I feel like I have just been through a war. And in reality, we have. And so pulling yourself back out takes a lot of strength. But the more that you do it, the easier it will become. And number 8, ask yourself what triggered the flashback. So there are things in our environment that can trigger flashbacks. If we smell something that reminds us of a past assault, or we see somebody who looks similar to our abuser, or we hear a sound that was a part of what was done to us when we were a kid, those things can trigger a flashback. And if we can identify what those are, we can then move forward and take back more control of our environment. We can practice, we can practice smelling the things, and we can practice seeing the pictures, or we can practice hearing certain sounds to where it no longer takes us back to the flashback, but yet we can see ourselves in a safe place when we experience those triggers. And so it's rewiring your brain. But the very first thing you have to do is identify what the triggers are. And so sometimes you have to go back and you have to try to remember, okay, when did this flashback start? What was I doing? What sound did I hear? What did I smell? Who was I with? To help identify what it is that triggered your flashback. But at the same time, I also believe that sometimes there is no trigger except God is saying, okay, you're ready. This is something you need to work through and you're ready. And I'm right here and we're going to do it together. There are many times when I would have gone to my counselor and I would have told her I'm having so many flashbacks. And she would say to me, oh, that's a great sign. I'm like, what? Yeah, that's great. That means you feel like you are in a safe place to where your mind can process. That means your brain is healthy enough to deal with the things that you went through in the past. And so really that is true. It's a sign of you getting healthier and stronger. And yes, it sucks. It sucks major. There's nothing fun about a flashback. And I never want to have to go through another one again. But knowing that I have those hidden memories in my brain that are still impacting my everyday life, and knowing that God is going to present those to me when I am ready and when I am healthy enough and when I am safe enough, gives me a peace moving forward. And so I'm going to trust Him in that. And I'm going to accept the flashbacks for what they are and be prepared to handle them as best as I can with the tools that I have, believing that God is giving me this flashback for a reason and that it is the time that He wants it to come. And so last but not least, number 9, be proud of yourself. Flashbacks are hard. They're a big deal. And for people who've not experienced them, they're not going to understand. I didn't understand until I fully had my first flashback. I used to have little bits and pieces of flashbacks when I was younger, just flashes of things that honestly didn't make sense. And I would just push it down because I couldn't understand what it was. But when I started to have my first full-fledged flashbacks, I was scared, I was confused, and I wanted it to stop. And so it's taken a long time to get to where I am now. Do not shame yourself for the journey, for the process. Don't shame yourself for even having a flashback. It's not your fault. The memories are there. You can't change that. And when they come forward, you can't change that either. So show yourself grace. Give yourself a pat on the back because you have survived 100% of the flashbacks you've experienced. Be proud of yourself for where you are, for what you have processed through, and continue moving forward. We don't have to stay in the flashback. Yes, it impacts our life, but we don't have to live there because we got things to do, right? We got places to go, people to see, things to do, and we don't want that flashback to discourse us from our goals, from our life, from our relationships, from the things that we need to get done. It will disrupt us for a time, but don't look at that as a bad thing. Sometimes those interruptions in life, they put us closer to God. And I do feel like flashbacks are a kiss the wave moment. Charles Spurgeon has a quote that says, "I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages." And isn't that true? I mean, a flashback, there's nothing like a flashback to put you to your knees and to say, God, I need you. And so it's another moment of crying out to God, of feeling His presence, and then having the strength to get back up and continue on with your day. And guys, that takes strength. That's a superhero in my opinion. That is a big deal. And I know the people out there who have not experienced it will not understand what it's like or what you're going through. But I hope that you see yourself for being stronger and that you validate your pain, you call it for what it is. You speak life to yourself. You remind yourself of the truths. You call things with the words that they really are. You console your inner child, always asking God for help, focusing on where you are now, figuring out what triggered things, and then at the end of the day, be so dang proud of yourself because you're doing hard things and you are becoming a better version of you. I hope you have a blessed day.